Hi class, in this recording we're going to talk about theories of senescence, or theories associated with the degradation of function as we age. So a big question is, why on earth do our organs wear out? Why do we get older per se, or why do we lose function as we get really old? As we look at this process, senescence really is an intrinsic process. It appears that we are pre-programmed for inevitable cell death. We're pre-programmed to shut down at a predetermined age. The oldest human in recorded history is 122 years old, and that record is not even close to being broken right now. But there are some things that can contribute to senescence. So we're going to talk about some theories to why we get older and age and lose function. For instance, we could have some environmental factors build up and damage our cells over the course of our lifetimes. There's also the heredity. There have been excellent twin studies that looked at identical twins that were raised in different environments. So when the twins were put up for adoption and raised in different homes. And we find that these identical twins, even though they have different environments, they still have similar lifespans. Although because they have different, but they don't have identical lifespans, which is potentially related to those extrinsic environmental factors and lifestyle choices. There's also some genetic progeria conditions as well. Werner syndrome is the old school name for this genetic condition. The new school name is progeria. And progeria causes very rapid aging of the individual. For lack of a better analogy, you can think of dog years. And we say that 1 human year is equal to 7 dog years. So by the time a dog is 1 calendar year old, it's like a 7-year-old human. By the time a dog is 10 calendar years old, it's acting like a 70-year-old human. And dogs very rarely live for more than 12 or 13 years. When we look at individuals, humans that have progeria, they have very accelerated aging. Even though 1 calendar year has gone by, they can age 5 to 10 years in 1 calendar year. They can have 5 to 10 years of biological aging within 1 calendar year. So here we can see a figure of children that have progeria. And even though these are just children, they have many of the signs and symptoms of somebody who's very aged. Another theory of senescence is the replicative senescence theory. And this theory is going to focus on the ability of cells to reproduce, the mitotic potential of cells, and how it tends to decline as we age. Organ function is dependent upon the organ renewing its cells and tissues to keep it fresh and functioning. At the end of every chromosome, there's a region called a telomere, and this telomere can be thought of as a sacrificial segment of nucleotides. And as during chromosomal replication, the telomeres get a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter every single time we go through replication, unless we have some enzymes called telomerases that are making them longer again. So during the first generation of cells, the telomeres are really long, and this is how telomeres look in young people. But in very old people who have gone through many rounds of cellular division, their telomeres are very short. And then as they continue to go through cellular division, instead of chopping off the telomeres, they start to chop off essential genes from the chromosomes that they need to stay alive and have functioning. So old cells may have increasingly dysfunctional genes because of the fact that they are losing bits of nucleotides from their genes every time they go through a round of cellular division or mitosis. We also have the DNA damage theory, and this is the idea that we have mutations build up in our genome over time. Our DNA is going to have thousands of mutations accumulate per day. They can be from oxidative stresses generated from our metabolic chemical reactions, in particular the electron transport chain within cellular respiration produces free radicals. We also can have ultraviolet damage or carcinogenic chemicals in the environment providing damage to our genome. Regardless of the cause of the damage, many of these mutations are going to not be corrected, and they will persist and accumulate as we age. This is one of the reasons why, as we get older, the risk of cancer skyrockets in the human population, because as we get older, we are accumulating more and more and more and more mutations until we hit that critical threshold, and all of a sudden we have too many mutations, and our fully functional cells become cancerous cells. And that cumulative damage is going to impair our function. We also have the cross-linking theory. This is a theory that looks at the collagen in our bodies. This collagen becomes stiffer and stiffer as we get older because they have more connections forming between them. This stiffness is going to make our joints, lenses, everything in our body not function as well. And we're also going to stress our body more. As we have a stiffer and stiffer body, we have a harder time adapting to environmental stresses. We also find that we have cross-linking of our DNA and the enzymes that within our DNA, and this cross-linking of DNA and the enzymes within our nucleus also impairs function of our body. And there are other protein abnormalities that can build up. As we look at really old tissues, we have increasingly abnormal protein structures. For example, within our nervous tissue, there are some proteins that can deform and build up beta amyloid plaques within our brain. This is a key characteristic of Alzheimer's disease, the buildup of these protein plaques, these abnormally shaped proteins within the human brain. And as these cells and tissues become abnormally shaped because they have accumulated damage or had more moieties or functional groups attached, they accumulate abnormal proteins, and those abnormal proteins have an altered shape and altered structure, and an altered structure gives you altered function. Remember, structure determines function. That's the first thing I cover on the very first slide of this class. And here's a key example of how a bad structure gives you a bad function. We also have the autoimmune theory of aging, or senescence. And this is an idea that as we have oddly shaped proteins building up in our body, these oddly shaped proteins are recognized as foreign invaders by our immune system. And this could stimulate our body's own tissues, or lymphocytes, I should say, our body's own cells, to mount an immune response against our own body tissues. And then all of a sudden, our immune system starts to attack our own tissues. These autoimmune-based diseases become increasingly common as we age. This may be due to the fact that we have increasing amounts of abnormally shaped proteins in our bodies as we age. For me specifically, just for the sake of full disclosure, I tend to be an all of the above kind of guy. For me personally, I think all of these theories of senescence have value to them, and I think they all contribute to the aging process of our bodies. We're done with this recording though, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them on the class discussion board or shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.